Good evening, everyone. Oh, that's louder than I anticipated. My name is Joanne Gross, and along with Jean Schmatzer and Tim Reynolds, I serve as co-chair of the County Council Planning Work Group of the transition process. On behalf of our entire work group, welcome to our public forum on the role of the County Council. I know some people were expecting a forum on part-time, full-time, but we thought that the County Council deserved a deeper conversation than simply that. Since the beginning of this transition, I have continued to assert that this is a grand civic education project, an exciting opportunity for all of us to participate in the creation of a new government. Tonight is another step in that education process. We are expecting respectful, thoughtful, and reflective insights from our panel, and equally respectful, thoughtful, and reflective comments and questions from all of you. The format of our evening is very simple: a facilitated Q&A session with our panel and a facilitated Q&A session with you. There are cards and pens available for you to write out questions if you prefer to write them out, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions aloud as well. The session is being videotaped and will be available on the County Transition website as soon as possible. Our panelists this evening, if I get our third panelist here, our panelists this evening represent experience on an Ohio County Council, academic and research expertise on government best practices and county reform, practical wisdom gained from framing our new charter over many months last year, and service as a suburban mayor and council member. Pete Crossland serves as vice president of Summit County Council. He is an at-large member of council, but has also served as a council district representative and as a member of the Ohio House of Representatives. Our third panelist, who I hope arrives, Kevin O'Brien, is supposed to be here. He's the director of the Center for Public Management at CSU's Levin College of Urban Affairs, from where he has provided a wealth of research and technical assistance to all levels of government in the fields of public management, public finance, and economic development. Judy Rawson currently serves as co-chair of the Transition's Economic Development Work Group. A former city council member and mayor of Shaker Heights, Judy was a vital participant in the framing of Cuyahoga County Charter and in efforts to develop this entire transition process. Our facilitator this evening is Ike Brooks, managing director of The Partnership, a human resources consulting practice which he began after service with both TRW and General Electric. Ike's work involves helping organizations manage change with a special emphasis on human capital. And I will now turn the mic over to Ike. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Joanne, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out and being a part of something brand new and something important for our part of the region. This is a topical public forum. As Joanne mentioned, we will talk about the role of the County Council. And we will do that in a manner that tries to get everyone involved. On the front end and at the bottom of your agenda, you'll notice that there are some rules of engagement. I'd like to go over those very briefly so that we all understand what those rules suggest. First, we'd like everyone to participate positively and candidly. Really, that means to be as open and honest as you feel comfortable in this setting. The second piece of that is to listen openly. I'm going to guess in the course of the next hour and a half, you're going to hear something that you believe is absolutely brilliant. My experience with groups like this, that's usually something that you personally offer to the conversation. On the other hand, you may hear something that you think is totally absurd. That's okay too, because this evening we all want to learn about what this county council may provide for us. Third rule is to provide specifics for clarity. That's not a remake of Beau Geste. It's more of painting a picture in words so that everyone will understand what we're trying to convey. It's not he said, she said. It's not reliving the past. And as few words as possible, please. The other is, as we get to the public questions and input, we would like you to state your name before speaking. Also, in the interest of public disclosure, if you are a candidate for an office, please indicate that as you prepare your statements. And finally, as we get to that point, we'll have a 2-minute soundbite for each one, so a limit on the time that we spend together so it can be as productive as possible. And obviously everyone, we'd like to get everyone an opportunity to speak, so no second speeches until others have had an opportunity to provide an input. Do those rules make any sense? Okay, and I think this head nodding suggests something. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, can we play by those rules? Thank you very much. So let's get started and let's really talk about, as we see it, what are the functions, what are the activities, the role of the county council from your perspective? And Judy, would you give us some input there?
I'd be pleased to answer this question. Are we supposed to use this microphone? Because I think if we can agree on this first question, in a sense, all the rest follows. I think the fundamental role of the county council is to develop a process to ensure that all significant initiatives and programs get a full and honest debate. So I think that is going to lead to a discussion of committees. None of that is covered by the charter, but I would recommend that there be resident members with expertise relevant to the committee, on the committee. And then a lot of the debate that we've all been wanting to hear is going to occur in those committees. But once we have that structure for ensuring the debate, the fundamental role of the council is to set policy. Now that means set parameters for how do we deliver health and human services more effectively. It doesn't mean micromanage a very specific program and who's going to be the assistant director for administering that program. That is the role of the administration. It's the role of the council to set policy within which staff will work on the needs. The second significant role is to enact legislation for specific programs. The old rule that the executive proposes and the council disposes applies. So the staff would develop a proposal for protocols for purchasing or an economic development program, and the council would debate that and approve or change it or disapprove. The third that's mentioned in the charter is to confirm or deny top appointments made by the county executive, and there are a number listed that require approval of the council. Now, just to be clear, let me talk about what I think the council would not do. They would not develop personal programs for their own districts. They would not micromanage administrative programs. And that is stated really pretty clearly right within the charter itself, section 3.0910, if you're interested. They also would not try to direct administrative staff. Instead, a much healthier process is to direct a constituent complaint to the county administrative officer, and the county administrator would then refer it to the appropriate staff member who would be told to follow up with the constituent, give the council member credit for raising the issue in the first place, get it resolved. This is not the job of the council to get down in the details. I think if we can work within those basic parameters, we will have a wonderful relationship between the county council and the executive and the public.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Now, Pete, Judy's just kind of described setting policy, confirming, denying appointments, open debate. How's that work in the real world?
Imperfectly. Well, let's try this one. Is that better? I'm sorry. Okay, I just said I'd like to take a minute to get acquainted. I'm Summit County. I see only two faces that I recognize, and I'm wondering how many of you were active in this process of this great move that you've done. Most of you were out working on that. How many of you are county employees, or many? Okay. How many of you are running for an office? Okay, good. I'm glad to see that, because I especially am eager to talk with other council members or new council members here. I think it's just great what you've done up here. You know, we adopted our charter in Summit County 30 years ago, and we thought it was such a good idea, and it's worked pretty well, although it hasn't expanded nearly as much as we wanted to. We thought after a couple of years there would be a lot more counties, 88 in Ohio, doing it, and it took 30 years for you guys to be number 2. So we're really happy that you're doing it. It's very exciting, and you may or may not know that in Summit County we did not eliminate many of the elected offices when we first started. When we did one by one eliminate several, but you're going to be way ahead of us shortly. So I'd just like to congratulate everybody that worked on this and say that I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for folks here in Cuyahoga County. So I just wanted to do that. And then going back to your question, what is the role? Certainly, Judy, you've mentioned a number of things. The only thing I would just add is the budgetary role is a huge one. And of course, that's one part of the legislative enacting of resolutions and so forth. So that would be an important thing to add. And each of the things that we talk about here, whether it's dealing with appointments or the budget or resolutions and on and on. I mean, another thing to throw in is council puts levies on the ballot. Council puts proposals to amend the charter on the ballot. There are things like that. So that there are a lot of specific kinds of things that we could talk about one by one. And certainly, one that I want to kick around some with you is the relationship between the executive and the legislature, or in this case, the county executive and the county council, because there's a sort of a fine line there when you talk about proper legislative oversight and micromanagement, and I have a lot of good stories to tell about that. So I'm sure that would be my opening statement.
Okay. Well, both of you, could you share with us, we've listed 5 or 6, but if this council did nothing else, what would be the 1 or 2 things that are paramount so that we could have success?
My top 2 would be to really dig into the budget and make sure that it is neat and has been thought through carefully. And then, secondly, use the council committees for very substantive, thoughtful discussion of new legislative proposals. Going through this transition process, we've got 11 committees making recommendations on a better way to do whatever, and it's going to be the great opportunity of the council members to carry that discussion forward and start to implement some of the ideas in a unified way with a team spirit. That is the goal. And that's what you will find in cities that work really well.
Pete, how about in Summit County? Are those the top 2?
Well, I wouldn't put it just that way. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about, I don't know exactly how you move from what you have to where you're going. And if you look at all the procedures of personnel, all the procedures for contracts, those kind of things are going to have to be retooled a little bit. So, you know, one of the first things the council will need to do is to take a look at how those things are all working, and then how that's going to work with the new structure. structure. So initially, I think the biggest job for council would be, you know, setting the ground rules, personnel, contracts, the whole process. There'll be a number of, the charter is very good. In some places, it's very much like ours. But you know, there's a lot to fill in. So I think, first of all, to fill in, to get the regulations in place is going to be a big job.
I agree with that.
I mean, that's sort of number one. Then just to be a little bit argumentative in a friendly way, the idea that county council committees will debate a lot is a good idea, and it's something that can happen, and I think will happen in this structure better than the former structure. At the same time, a lot of people aren't so interested, and I'm just thrilled that this many people are here tonight that are interested in this, because in Summit County, you know, doing this for 30 years, people say, county council, what's that? Do you pick up the garbage, you know? So, you know, I think that you don't have a huge amount of public participation. We don't touch citizens as directly and broadly as do city governments. And so debate may not be the best word for it, but certainly the job of county council and the committees will be to understand what's going on, the structure, how the departments work, and certainly their budgets. And you know, digging into that is going to take some time because it's a huge amount of information and issues, and a great challenge, but that's the way legislative bodies work in general.
Okay. Judy?
Actually, I want to have us exercise our imaginations a little bit.
Is this one working?
In the city I'm familiar with, the way you get thoughtful debate in a council committee is you have citizen members on that committee who know something about the subject matter the committee's trying to deal with. So for the county, the biggest thing the county does is deliver health and human services. If the council were to appoint 3 citizen members who are very familiar with health and human services but don't have a stake, aren't looking for work themselves, then when there is a proposal on how to deliver health and human services or how to reform it, you can get some very realistic field reaction on whether that's going to work or not. In my city, we had those kinds of debates around new housing programs, economic development. It's actually been wonderful. I agree with Pete that probably most of us are not going to use our evenings going to county council committee meetings. I absolutely agree with that. So I think the structure has to build in input from disinterested but qualified experts.
Okay.
Sure. And you want me to respond a little to that? So, I mean, yeah, and that's true. And the great thing about the committee structure is that it does provide a forum. And, you know, we tend to get citizen input and even input, well, from within government. When there's conflict, when something isn't resolved, then attention gets given to it. Now, I would react to one other thing you said, and that is human services being so central. And I'm a human services guy. I've been active in that area. And so I quite agree with that. But I would guess that most members of our council would say, well, that's not so important because the general fund revenues are what we have to worry about. And human services, there isn't much general fund going into that. So in a sense, our biggest, most important focus in terms of the general fund dollars that we spend and in terms of the array of problems is in the criminal justice system. You know, with the sheriff, with the prosecutor, and with the jail, with the clerk of courts, and the judicial system. So that's a huge operating system that takes a good deal of time and is important. Human services is trickier because we're working with the state, and many of the dollars that come in are pass-through dollars, and sometimes we don't really even have much choice about it even, or there's not much debate. I mean, for example, children's daycare. You know, daycare money just comes in, and what it's a entitlement program, and so it comes in, and they send us the money, and we say, okay. You know?
Okay.
So there's a lot to sort out, you know, and that's part of it.
Okay. Well, Pete, somewhat earlier you mentioned relationships between the council and the county executive. Tell us a little bit about how that works. Are the kind of relationships you enjoy in Summit County more in the competing or the collaborative or the accommodating? Just how does that work?
Well, over 30 years we've had all of those and more, you know, because it depends so much on the personalities and modus operandi of the people involved. And you know, well, let me just, I was talking to someone before the meeting and said that in our county, 3 of the county commissioners who retired, 2 of them got on county council. And we had a 7-person council at that time. So they kind of kept being commissioners. And of course the new executive didn't like that. So there was immediate push and pull with that. And but that's indicative of a continuing kind of struggle of who just has how much power. And there is this issue, what is proper legislative oversight, and what is meddling and, you know, micromanaging. And of course, council member and executive might have slightly different views of that. And I can give a lot of examples of that. And I would just say briefly, and I'm trying to be brief, if the executive wants to really be cooperative and the council want to be cooperative, that can work. And over the period of time, we have had some very, very good communication and team playing and so forth. But it's a big world and a big system, and some of your council members are going to want to play some politics. You might have a county executive with an ego problem. You know, I mean, all those things get so mixed in. And we have had situations in Summit County. I'm very happy right now. It's the easiest it's ever been. I've been on the council for 22 years, which is a good argument for term limitations or experience, depending on how you look at it. I prefer the latter. But in that time, right now is I think the best time we've ever had, because the executive is very reasonable. Council people are reasonable. We have dialogue back and forth with staff. Executive staff works with us well, and that's amazing. It was so bad several years ago, the opposite of that happened. The county executive got angry at the council. We weren't doing what he wanted. At some point, and this is kind of hard to believe, I'm embarrassed to tell it, this is how bad it can get. He issued a directive that no one in county government under his domain should speak to any member of county council except to go through one person. Well, that just, I mean, people were afraid to say hello in the elevator. I mean, it was that bad, you know. So you can have a wide range of things, and you know, it depends a lot on the degree of cooperation, the degree of political, shared political goals. I mean, you know, you have the dysfunction, and I know I'm going over my 3 minutes here. I told you, you got to wait about. But I mean, you have the dysfunction of someone who's trying to make headlines, you know, or that kind of thing, or someone who just has a personality problem. Okay. And so you have to work through all those things.
All right. Judy, as one of the framers of the charter, and what was envisioned from a relationship standpoint? Yeah.
Well, we had a huge debate about this, actually. What was hoped for is that it would be a very collaborative relationship. Oh, that it would be a very collaborative relationship. That is what we had hoped for. We then had a debate, and we should ask Pete how it works in Summit County, on whether any of these council members should be at large. We ended up deciding they all had to be from specific districts. I would have liked to have some at large. I think that's going to affect the dynamic. But I think since a number of you are candidates, if 6 of the elected council members can get together and say, we want to set the precedent for a very strong collaborative relationship, you're going to be able to figure out what the core elements of that are and put it in place. And I think what you need from the county executive is a willingness to work with you to say to his or her directors, if a council member has a concern or a question, you need to get back to that council member, tell them how quickly you're going to get back, and do it in the professional way that you do all your other work. I've now worked with a number of the directors in the county. They're incredibly professional. They're not going to play politics if they don't have to. They don't want to. But I think council has a chance to set a really new tone.
Thank you. Now,
just make a comment about the whole business of how I got.
he's got his own, Judy.
We know about that.
The whole business of you're a member of council and someone raises a question about what's happening in the dog licensing department, and so who do you call, the chief of staff of the county executive, or do you just call the head of the dog licensing department, or whatever? And there has to be some fluidity in that, and it's working pretty well right now that any member of council is welcome to call anybody anytime. And if it's and the directive to all the department people and the people under them, the heads and people under them, is basically like, someone council calls you and has a question, well, answer it. If you can help them a little bit, go ahead. And, because you don't want to have to go through an awkward chain of okays just to get some basic information or handle some small problem. So that works well. On the other hand, if it's something that's highly controversial or complicated, then yeah, you definitely need to have that go through the department heads and the executive, and it kind of finds its own route if people are all cooperative. But there's always going to be some bumps on that, though.
Oh yes.
Yeah, tell us, how do you distinguish between what are the major, what are the minor items, so that you're going the right place?
Let me jump in here, because I think I disagree with Pete on this. As a former mayor, it is very hard for staff members to say to an elected official, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to repair Bridge X before Bridge Y. That would be the county issue. Or the city issue, we're not going to resurface Street A before Street B. So I think there does need to be a high-level traffic cop. Now, if the question is purely informational, then it will be very quickly directed to the appropriate staff member. If the council member is trying to get something done and is asking for something, I think it's got to go through the county administrator, who can not only direct it to the person with the most expertise, but if the honest answer is no, it is up to the county administrator to give that answer, not some middle-ranking staff member who's afraid about his or her job. So minor versus major, I think, well, I would say they're all potentially major, because once in my city, and we've got other mayors here in the audience, once you get, the council member gets a staff member on the phone, the requests start to cascade. And so I would say we have huge collaboration. There's never a sense of we, they, but we channel it very carefully to protect the professional role of staff members.
So it sounds like there ought to be some protocol, some procedure, some guidelines, so that we aren't all out for a pass.
Yes, and I think I would suggest council could suggest some, but they need to work it out with the elected chief executive so that they're all agreeing on what the protocol is.
Okay.
Pete? I don't disagree with the thing you said. I think maybe we're talking about different things. I mean, to call up someone and say, I want the street paved is not the way to go, but it would be all right to call up to someone and say, when is this street on the schedule to be paved? And anyone can answer that. And as we conduct county council, we have the different department heads or even sub-department heads. I mean, someone comes up who's, who works with the human services contracts. And we know her, she's there a lot. And if I was looking for a spreadsheet that laid out a bunch of contracts for TANF programs, I could call her and say, hey, would you have a copy of that? Could you send that over to me? She'd say, sure. I don't need to go and anybody to her boss or her boss's boss to do that. And that's what I meant with it kind of finds its own level. But certainly it would be inappropriate for council to demand anything of anybody, really. I mean, certainly to request it of the executive at the executive level, sure, and that happens, and that's so. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but it does get, you know, sometimes it gets a little tricky, especially when you talk about, well, decisions that have to be made. I'm trying to think of a street. See, I don't work with streets, so I don't think of a good street decision, but decisions that have to be made, you know, how much, see, council has the obligation to review decisions and to find out about if say a bunch of, you buy a batch of new trucks to do snow plowing or something, and they start breaking down, and you know, you want to find out, and you're not finding very good information about that. So, you know, it would be very easy to start micromanaging, telling people how to buy trucks. On the other hand, it might be necessary if that information isn't coming through and you're getting lots of complaints and something's askew, then you're going to ask too many questions, you're going to be called and you're micromanaging.
So it sounds like
that's happened to me.
Yeah, it sounds like in our violent disagreement, we can come to the point that some rules, some procedures need to be in place.
I think the head note on this is, if you're trying to set a rule that's going to apply to the county as a whole in ordering these trucks, it probably would become before the committee, and the committee as a whole would make it with a lot of input from the administration. If one particular council member wants trucks of a certain kind, or trucks to be spending their time this way, then that is an attempt by that one legislator to take responsibility for the issue of trucks, which is remarkably important in a governmental jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Now, as we're winding down from a time standpoint, we're all familiar here with how city councils operate. What might be a difference between the county council and a city council? Judy.
Well, we sort of talked about the difference stylistically. I don't think there's needs to be a huge stylistic difference. In most cities, council members do not have their own staff. They use administrative staff. The clerk of courts coordinates it. I would assume that for the county, there will be so many phone calls that there would have to be somebody receiving those phone calls and directing them to the appropriate council member. But I don't see that every council member has to have his or her own staff. The other big difference between counties and cities is simply the subject matter jurisdiction. Counties are responsible for areas generally set by general law, health and human services, economic development, according to our charter, justice, as Pete has said. And the charter very specifically says that the county does not have jurisdiction over municipal matters unless the relevant municipality has asked the county to come in. So I think the way they do business would be very similar to whatever you like about the city in which you live, but the topics that they are discussing will be quite different.
Yeah, that's certainly true, and I know from talking to members of city council, it's a much rougher job constituency-wise. And of course, one of the roles of council we maybe touched on is, you know, constituent services. If someone is having a problem and there's a part of the organized structure that isn't responding correctly, it's entirely appropriate to ask a council member to look into that through the channel and that kind of thing. So the fact is that cities deal with snow removal and street repair and garbage and water and sewer and things like that affect an awful lot of people on a day-to-day basis. County council members get relatively few calls from Joe Public. I mean, someone who just has a problem like that. So that's a big difference.
I called a former Cuyahoga County administrator before coming tonight to say, think back to your days there. What would be the primary constituent call you would get? And she said it would be from the mom who's calling to say, you just took my child away and put my child in foster care and this is not fair. Or it would be from the family member who says, I've got an aging parent who needs, there's a specific program, and would want to get the parent into that program. So it would be that sort of thing, whereas in the city, you tend to get irate calls because the garbage was missed and they're not coming back, or there's a pothole and I just wrecked the axle on my car because I went over that pothole, and city, you are responsible, and there's a lot of screaming that goes on. So the goal is to have, to buffer the staff from that kind of screaming when a constituent is having a bad day.
So does that suggest that this Health and Human Services that we began part of this discussion around becomes paramount with the county council?
I don't know. Pete would know better. It is certainly true that most of the Health and Human Services funds come from the feds or the state, and there are many strings attached. And so the council doesn't have a lot of discretion, but whether they're implementing this well, it becomes the crucial issue, and the public tends to have opinions on whether it's being done well.
Yeah, if we get several calls that a number of people have gone down to Human Services and had difficulties and unacceptable barriers to applying for food stamps, then yeah, we want to know about it. And those kind of things do happen. And my only point is that we don't get as much of that as city folks.
So if we could crystallize around legislative authority, what may the council then make laws about?
I'm sorry,
from a legislative authority standpoint, what laws would the county council make?
Oh, okay. So you're just saying what kind of law does county council make? Well, it depends a lot. I don't even know. Do you have townships? How many do you have?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. We've got
Two.
quite a few. We've got yeah. And so you can make law that has an effect in the township, but not necessarily in the municipality. If there's any conflict or so forth, and that's a gray area that we've had some major disputes about in Summit County. So if you're just talking about making laws that regulate kinds of activities, like we're having now a lot of problems with these quote, skill game arcades, which is just a front for gambling. We're trying to regulate them. A couple townships are pushing us to do that. Other townships don't seem interested. And, we're trying to work with the city of Akron to harmonize the approach, that kind of thing. So we can't pass resolutions that regulate certain things, but we don't have any authority in the municipalities, obviously.
Okay, so it sounds like unincorporated areas.
Well, I think it would be broader than that, wouldn't it, Pete? For instance, the county has not had a huge role in economic development historically here in Cuyahoga County. The charter says this is going to be a primary role of county government. So whatever the Economic Development Commission, which is created under the charter, and I assume there will be a council committee on economic development, whatever they decide are going to be the parameters of the key programs. That would have to be put into legislative form and passed by the council, because you're going to be expending money and hiring staff, et cetera, to do that.
Well, that's a different kind of, I thought you were just talking about ordinances that regulate behavior, like people pass a law to make it illegal to gamble or to not be licensed if you're a game of skill or whatever. But you're really talking about approving programs and contracts, and of course, yeah, and you know, I'm impressed that you're emphasizing economic development so much. We have not done that in our charter as much as you do it in your charter. And we have not been terribly active in that area. More recently, the county has been more active in Summit County and working out a major agreement to keep Goodyear's world headquarters in Akron, for example. So, and our current executive has been more aggressive in the past. So, you know, again, that's program development. Of course, the council has to authorize the contracts that are enacted and appropriate the monies that go with them. And those are certainly major roles. But on the other hand, we don't have a lot of money to throw around that area either. So it's kind of tough.
Okay. As we think about this whole county council, what haven't we covered that we should cover in this kind of forum, just to share with interested people in Cuyahoga County?
I think there are 3 issues that are going to come up in the questions, so we may as well put them on the table.
Okay.
One is this a part-time or a full-time job? The second is, have we been wise in creating 11 districts as opposed to fewer districts with some at large? And Pete has real expertise on that. And the third is, you know, if you have a council that's working the way Pete and I have, we seem to actually be agreeing on the ideal model, how many staff members do they need?
Yeah.
So you ought to go on part-time versus full-time and at-large versus district.
Well, I'd like to start with staff. If that's
Take direction very well.
They really agree, don't they?
It's very much tied into part-time versus full-time. And there is a range of models. Now, on the one hand, we have kind of a typical board of trustees of a nonprofit or a university or a hospital or something. They have the authority to hire and fire the executive and make the decisions. They're the policy makers. And yet, we know that in most cases, they hire someone to do all that and they say, yeah, okay, do it. And if there's a snit, they look at it. But a lot of times, if you have a really competent executive, board of trustees does darn little. And you know, that's one model for county council, and we've debated this at this level theoretically. And it certainly does make a difference if you have a competent, you know. On the other hand, Kent State University some years back lost confidence in their president, and they sort of put him on leave, and the board of trustees kind of moved in and divided up and ran the place for a few months, which was really difficult for them, but they felt they had to do that. So, you know, that's another extreme. Another extreme, or another way to look at it is you think of county council as being more like a board of trustees and not doing so much actively. Now, on the other end of that is Montgomery County, Maryland. Our council went over there, some of us went over there just to look at a different model of how they operated. And that operation over there is really huge. You really have a separate but equal branch, and they have, each council person has a couple staff members. They are very, very deeply involved in policy decisions and budgetary matters. And so, in a way, that's a lot more a professional model. I mean, the model of Congress or the state legislature, you know, where you do have a pretty good amount of staff, legal staff, budgetary staff. And so, you know, you have to sort of ask the question, do you want to have a separate but really equal body, or do you want to have more of a body that kind of hangs back and resolves conflicts and has oversight? And you know, I don't think there's any great answer for that that's obvious. And it seems to me that because this is such a big county, and because you have you're getting you're abolishing most elected officials, that means that probably the county council should be maybe a little more professional than we need to be in Summit County. I don't know. It's going to be an ongoing debate. I can tell you that it is for us. Will be for you.
Yeah, it's pretty clear one size doesn't fit all.
But I think we're trying to save tax dollars here in Cuyahoga County. So creating an 11-member council with the expectation they would have a huge staff could be very counterproductive. So I would actually think very carefully about that.
It is, and it's really bad too if you elect 11 people and they want to hire a couple of campaign workers or something to come in and answer the phone or do constituent calls. On the other hand, if you don't have substantial expertise, you don't have much independent power in the fields of law and budget, for example. So I would say probably you should have in your council staff some really strong legal people, some very experienced top lawyers, and a good budget person, and at least that much. And if you don't have, then you wind up relying on the executive to do that. And we're doing that in Summit County right now. We had an attorney, a full-time attorney with our staff for a number of years. She was really good. She helped with a lot of things during that time. It was a period where all that intense conflict was, and we were practically going to court because his attorneys weren't cooperating. We couldn't sit down and resolve things, so we really needed to have our own attorney. Right now, his chief attorneys are just down there helping us all the time, and pretty much we're relying on them.
Well, I will say that I'm a lawyer. I started out in the law department in the city of Cleveland.
You didn't tell me that before. I should have been warned.
And I happened to be the first lawyer that any member of council was willing to use, and it was Jay Westbrook, and we developed a very close relationship. I was doing a job. I wasn't for the administration or for the council. As a member of council in a city, which is admittedly much smaller than the county, I found that my role was asking the tough questions. And there were quite a few lawyers on our council, and the legal staff knew that when it came to council, it was going to get very tough questions and they better be prepared. I was very happy to have them go back and implement. I didn't need my own lawyer to draft the documents. I needed to know that I had asked the right question. On the budget, you have to have a council that is willing to say, present it in this format so it is truly intelligible. And if you're not going to do that, we're going to have a committee hearing and reformat the budget so it is intelligible. But I'm quite prepared, I was quite prepared to let the administration figure out if we're going to save some money in the fire department, do you do it? There are about 20 different ways you could do it. What is the better way to do it? I just wanted to know what was the actual increase over last year and how are we allocating the money within a department and between departments. I didn't need my own staff to do that. I just had to tell the administrative staff, present the budget in this format.
Okay.
Well, that's, I think that's, I have a problem with that, but again, if you've got a stone wall or an incompetent, I've been there a long time, so that several names could be without identifying, but we had times where most of council had very little confidence in our director of budget and management. And so, we were just kind of like scared to death that they didn't even know how much money we had and what our bills were. And so it depends on the season.
It does sound like it's pretty situational.
Yeah, but one of the great stories, I think it's long enough ago, when I was on council, we had a director of one of the departments who was incompetent. And one of the council members went into the mayor and said, if you don't fire this guy, I'm going to take this public because he is not doing the job. And we very shortly had a new director, and the council member was right. Different ways to skin the cat.
But see, that's not easy, because what if the council member were wrong, Or what if the executive knew he was right, or she was right, and didn't want to do anything about it because, you know.
If
So
the majority of council thinks the person is incompetent, that is fairly confusing. So I think the role of council is to ask really good, tough questions and frame the conversation instead of having two large branches of government squabbling over the details, which is what we're seeing at the federal government right now. I don't think it's so appealing.
But it depends a lot on the competence of individual members of council.
Yes.
And, you know, some people are going to be elected with, say, no formal education, but a lot of savvy. Others may have formal education, but not have a great ability to ask questions. Someone elected, you know, I will have, you know, I hate to admit this, but I think attorneys are more able to quickly dig in many cases.
Good comment, Pete.
A lot of times attorneys get really down, like, you know, these little picky guys try to use my patience. But in general, in my experience with counsel, people come in who have been attorneys or who have had, you know, extensive experience in government are going to be able to ask these questions. If someone comes in and they've been an insurance salesman or a grocer, or, you know, haven't had experience, they really need to have someone to dig in and help them formulate the questions.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know, we have over the period of time, we have had some very good staff members who would dig into legislation and analyze it and do some research and give us good questions, and other times we haven't had that. Sometimes we needed it more than others, and, you know. So it's, again, there's not an easy answer, but you do need to have some substantial expertise. I guess I'll throw it at you, Judy. Here, what do you think the ideal county council staff should be? I mean, they just got elected, and they're all 11 of them are saying, "Judy, tell us how to organize
You're
this.
not going to
Who shall we hire?"
Well, I was just with a number of the drafters of the charter at a press conference for the Health and Human Services Levy, and I said, I'm going to ask this question. I want to be sure I'm speaking for all of us. How many staff did we have in mind? And the answer was 2 or 3, shared among the council.
That's just not enough. You don't need 20 or 15, but you know, you need someone who's really good at clerking. You know, there's a professional clerks association, and someone who's good at knowing all the rules and following all the proper documentation. So you need at least someone who's very good at that. And I think you do need a legal person, probably a budget person, a constituent person, maybe somebody who's just a general analyst, somebody who has really good research skills that can be assigned to different places. So, you know, yeah, if you don't, you've got to have more than 2 or 3 to do the job.
Well, I'm not sure we can answer this question definitively tonight, but it does sound like you need a certain skill set. And that skill set may be based on the skills to complement whomever may be the council member and or the executive. It certainly suggests that a shared services approach may be in play from a pure effectiveness of cost standpoint. Whether it's 2, whether it's 20, I'm not sure that this gathering could do that. But at least we know that there are certain skills, there are certain competencies that may be required. And numbers of people that's up for a lively debate.
I think it would be also interesting to ask Pete. You are the vice president of the council?
Actually, I'm not now, but I've been almost everything on the council at one time or another.
When you were, when the council was working well, what was the role you played?
As vice president?
Or as chair of the council?
Or as president?
President.
Yes.
Well, let's see. I'm not sure what you're getting at. I mean,
What is the
what's
role?
the role of the president of council? Okay,
Assuming the council is working well.
okay, this is a new
Yeah,
issue.
this is a new one.
Or do you not want me
Which
to
is
go
okay. It's okay with me.
Well, right now, we certainly want to get input from everyone, and if we were to stay on task, it said the role of the council as opposed to the role of the executive.
Oh, I see.
Okay, is that fair, folks?
No, I'm asking about the role of the president of the council.
Council, okay.
But we can skip that. We can go to public
And
questions.
that's a really
Okay.
interesting question, and I've seen a lot of presidents come and go, including me, and we all have both different approaches and different, roles in a way. But
Okay.
we can talk about that later.
But recapping, we spent pretty much the last hour talking about role of the council, primary functions, activities, where the legislative authority or areas of focus ought be, differences between the county council and a city council, and ending up with what are the kind of relationships between that council and the executive/administration. And we should applaud our panelists. And I let the record show that they actually shook hands. But let's now shift to some questions that you may have about this. And young lady, please.
I'd first like to make a statement.
Well, before we make statements, let's revisit our rules of engagement.
Then I will incorporate my statement into my question.
All right.
When we talk about the role of the county council, believe me when I say the first important thing will be the budget, and it will consume them for a long time. Economic development for the sake of this region must be the second most important responsibility of the council. And to frame my question, I'd like to see the council change the format for the county administrator, and that person is no longer elected, but is appointed, because the moment that person is elected, you have an elected politician who is going to be a politician from the first day to the last day. And it's not going to work as well as you'd like. It's an honest error that was probably made, because whether your consultants didn't give you the correct information, you didn't seek out models from other places, but you don't want an elected county executive.
Okay.
Okay, now my question.
Please. And could you tell us who you are?
My name is Beverly Green. I have prior experience in county government in another state, about the same size as Cuyahoga County.
Okay.
Okay. And I was elected county-wide as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Question.
Why would you want to have a part-time council and not have them have the benefit of a full-time staff to collect information and assess information? If you don't want that county council to micromanage, then you will want them to have all the information they can to make great decisions on the night of the vote, and then they leave.
Okay, so question may be why part-time versus full-time?
Well, if you're going to have a part-time council, they must have a staff.
Judy, you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, and I want to address the question implicit in the statement also. I am assuming that the staff in the executive branch of the county are professionals, and that they will provide the information to the part-time council so that they can make very well informed decisions, and the council doesn't have to reinvent the wheel before every vote. So I guess that's my short answer. On the why would you want to have an elected chief executive, we discussed that at great length. And I will tell you, as mayor, I was elected at large, and when council members came in and told me quite certainly what the public wanted, I was able to say, no, they don't. Because I went to 84 block parties last year, and I was elected, I ran with you, and that was not an issue that was raised. and this is what the public is concerned about. If you are a chief executive hired by the council, you don't have that independent credibility to set direction and believe in your own judgment. So I think an elected chief executive is very important.
And that assumes the model of a strong executive that's more or less let the council does minimum, more like a board of trustees, I think, for it. But just to put that in a real example, we had in Summit County several years ago a major fuss about what was happening in our animal shelter. And our county executive proposed a couple of locations for a new one, and there were all kinds of means by humane groups that the old one was bad, doing terribly bad things, and they were partly. And the new executive kind of was defensive about that, was making choices about where he wanted to put the animal shelter that some of us didn't feel very comfortable with. And so, you know, it became a battle of wills, and sort of finally became a Mexican standoff. I shouldn't say Mexican, but you know, you got a loggerheads. Well, when we got a new executive, he took a different approach, listened to everybody, we came to some agreement, and that's the way it should work, but it won't always work that way.
Right.
And that's why you need to have staff that are competent enough to go out and evaluate locations and the pluses and minuses of how accessible the location might be and what the cost might be, and try to figure out if there are any hidden agendas to put the pound right here as opposed to, you know.
Well, someone has asked, are the Summit councilmen part-time or full-time?
Part-time,
Okay.
definitely.
Right.
Even more so, and that goes to something that Judy mentioned a little bit. We haven't talked about the salary business.
Okay.
We're getting paid around 21 or something like that right now. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but only half of what your folks are going to be paid, and we're definitely considered to be part-time. Okay. And so that's, again, a relative thing. In a way, I think it's a little bit of a high salary if it's really going to be part-time. On the other hand, it's not a high salary if you're going to work at it half-time and really work at it, which you should.
Right.
Because it's, I don't know, I've been in other legislative positions, you know, any legislative position is a bottomless pit because there's more information there and more decisions and more things you can do. You know,
is that 20,000 salary alone, or does that include benefits, or are there benefits?
No, that's just salary, and there is health benefits.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll pepper in some from the cards as well as we go through.
And while he's walking over, I'll just say I agree with Pete on this. I think the salary is too high.
My name's Tim Russo. I'm a candidate for County Council District 7, which includes downtown. My question is for Ms. Rawson. You mentioned repeatedly about discussions that we had as framers regarding the charter. Are those discussions, were they recorded, or is there any record of them, and would you make that information public so we could see those discussions?
It was in a public forum. There were about 20 people there during the final day. We had many meetings leading up to this. It was entirely open, but I don't think there were.
There's no record of those debates about the role of the council? Because I think that would be useful to these. Could we get access to those?
There are no written records.
There's no written record of the debate you had about the role of council
not that I recall.
Before drafting the charter?
No.
Why?
Because we were all volunteers and nobody thought we were going to succeed. And we were putting it together.
You definitely succeeded, and now there's a government that's been created, and you're discussing what, quote, framers' intentions were, and, we don't know who they are.
No, I'm not saying that just because that's what we intended that it is like a constitution. The charter is our constitution right now. The people voted, passed it overwhelmingly. You're going to have a chance to amend it in 2012. So the question, all of this will be redebated, I'm sure, when the charter.
Right, but I would just like to ask who was involved in the drafting, what there, you know, and what if there was a record of that discussion. I mean, that's kind of, I'm asking a hard question like you would ask a counselor to ask.
Well, it was all in the newspaper, and I think we're going backwards. Maybe we ought to go forwards. I mean, this was reported.
Well, but you keep referring to this we who drafted the charter, and I don't know who that we is. I mean, I suppose you were.
I was. Marcia Fudge was very involved at one point. Harriet Applegate was very involved at one point. We had a number of former mayors. We had Jean Kramer, who is very familiar with the Summit County, who is here with us tonight. We had a number of state elected officials. It was a pretty diverse
and it would be good if those discussions could be made public in some way.
There's no record, so there's no way for me to do that.
There's no record of the drafting of this charter.
That's right.
Well, can you say ask the answer? Let's move on.
Yeah,
it does, yeah. And hopefully that helps, because you kind of asked two questions. Who were they, and is there a record of? And I guess just for the not knowing, but the charter does exist, and that does spell out duties and responsibilities. There's a question coming.
First of all, I'd like to say that gentleman had a very substantial point, and I agree. My name is Mr. Johnson. First of all, how many people in here know how many county governments are in the United States? County executive governments. There are 3,000 counties in the United States. Of that, only 2% had a county executive form of government. And we are the 73rd county executive form of government. Okay. With that, one of the things that we have to be concerned with now, and you addressed it earlier, sir, with the fact that we're going to have some clarification with the role of county council government as relates to the state, because county government is still a creature of the state. And there are certain laws that are granted to county government through the state. We do not have home rule. Okay, we have been fortunate over the years to accrue some powers that give you that perspective, but we do not have home rule. So there's going to have to be a clarity about the power that's going to be available to this new council. And also, while we talk about policy development, there's also a matter of operations. Okay, and I'd like them to also, if the gentleman from Akron could relate more information about the policy toward operations and county council's role in operations, because in Cuyahoga County there's a $1.8 billion, almost $2 billion in our operations, and we need to make sure that people we elect to the office have a knowledge about budgetary information, and also are going to have a role to play in how that budget is spent and developed.
Okay, now I think there are two questions. One may be, how does the county council relate to state government? Right. Okay, and the second is, from a very practical standpoint, how does the council get involved in county operations day to day?
The budgetary standpoint, yes.
Okay, all right, and you directed that at Pete?
Pete, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But you know, if
you're
Ross would like to have a
shot 2 minutes now.
I'm just saying, if Mayor Rossi has a perspective that she perceives that county council, that the framers had for this process, I'd like to hear that too.
Okay.
Well, county council and charter government is, of course, operated under the Ohio Revised Code, and they give us the authority to do this. And there are certain things we can do and certain things that we cannot do, and there's a little rule of thumb that is this of statewide interest. And so we can change certain things which would go against what the Ohio Revised Code would prescribe to counties that didn't have a charter, as long as it doesn't go against what's perceived to be a statewide interest. Well, that's debatable, and so we're partly feeling our way along to see what we can and cannot do.
Okay.
As best I can answer that.
All right. Now, how about in the day-to-day operations of the county?
I beg your pardon?
The day-to-day operations of the county, how does the council get involved in those? from a budgetary standpoint?
Well, the day-to-day operations, I don't think so. The annual budget hearings are very important. And of course, we do parts of that when we approve contracts or make other appropriations outside the budget. But day-to-day, no, the council isn't involved at all. I mean, it's a separate branch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I just correct one thing? Most of you are probably from cities with charters. If you live in a charter city, you do have home rule. The county will be operating under a charter. It will have home rule. It is no longer a creature of the state. It receives a number of funds from the state. It must be in compliance with the general laws of the Ohio Revised Code. But the county no longer has to go to the state to ask permission to do things. That's the whole point of having a charter.
Well, I think it's not always clear what we can and can't do.
Well, I agree with you on uniform laws, but I just wanted to correct the home rule point.
But that's correct what he said. We're feeling our way through. We don't have that yet. We're feeling our way through.
I appreciate your interest in this subject, but we do have some other questions, so we can get back to you as the other questions get answered. Is that okay, Mr. Johnson? Okay.
I have a mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Julian Rogers, and I'm also a candidate for County Council in District 10. And I had one quick comment and then a question. The comment is just in reference to the staff. My fear would be that since these are political offices, with having county council having to defer to a county executive that may or may not like that person, I could see discrepancies in how information gets flowed to particular councilmen. That's just an observation. But my question is, in considering that, our current county government does engage in some economic development activities, I think of Gateway or the Arts and Culture Levy, some things that have been successful, some things that have not, the Mayor Trust Building. I wonder what are some of the types of economic development activities that are appropriate for the county government to be engaged in, and are there any examples in Summit County of some of the good examples of economic development?
Okay, thank you.
Well, as was earlier said, we have not emphasized that, and most counties don't. But certainly we're able to do things, and for example, negotiate with companies to. We have tax abatement programs, which is one thing that is ongoing and is statewide, I think. We have also the ability to negotiate if a company wants, some company wants to build a factory or something, we could agree to pay for some of the services, lay the water lines or put streets in and things like that, and we can use county dollars to help bring about the deal. And we've been very successful in Akron with a couple of big projects lately where the city of Akron and Summit County got together, both put some substantial numbers of millions of dollars into a pot along with some private investors, and put together a package that seems to be working pretty well. And so those are the kind of things we can do. We can also work with our growth associations or chambers or whatever to try and encourage businesses to locate in our area, that kind of thing. So that'd be my answer.
All right. Now, here's a question from the floor, and then I'll get right to you, and we'll get a microphone close to you as well. Will there be a vetting process for the administrative staff? And by this, a method to deter favor hires and assure that staff is qualified?
The answer under the charter is absolutely, and I could tell you the article that's relevant, but it's on the county website. A Human Resources Commission is established to set job qualifications for all jobs throughout the county and competitive salaries, and also the protocol that should be followed before people are hired. And it sets it up in enough detail so that no one person will be able to hire staff without input from a few others.
Okay.
Linda Mayer, I'm co-chairman of the work group that's trying to frame a code of ethics for the county, and we are supposed to present a proposed ordinance to the council on January 2nd, maybe sometime in January, which leads me to my question. I'm very interested if you would speculate what the first month is going to be like for the new county council. How much stuff is going to land on their desks all at once, along with my committee's proposal? Now, you can only speculate because no one quite knows, but perhaps you would speculate because the first month might be a bit intimidating for some people who are planning to undertake this.
Okay, well, Pete, from a real world
well, it
standpoint.
won't necessarily be intimidating to experienced people, but it will be overwhelming, and there's a difference. And I think, yeah, when I first spoke about what council, the first thing council will do, is to set a lot of broad policies, and ethics is one of them, along with the Human Services, or the Human Resources Commission, and all those kind of things. So yeah, it's going to be a very busy, and council at the same time is going to be organizing and choosing their committee chairs and getting those things going. And so, I think it will be an overwhelming big task, but it will be exciting and important, and I think it's doable. It'll take a while to get the bugs out. In any organization, you're always finding new bugs and so forth. On something like ethics, we had our ethics legislation for a long time. Not much came of it, and then there got to be some political squabbles about people being hired related to other people, and just how far out does that have to be? Can I hire someone who's my wife's third cousin, or is that a conflict, or not the same as if I hire my own child or something? And so we had a big to-do about that, and actually had a competing charter amendments at one point, and that was 6 or 8 years ago, and that's all been quiet since then. So anyway, talk to me.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Adams. I'm here with Danita Love, who's running for County Council District 9. My question to Mayor Rawson is, in the charter it says words to this effect: $45,000 salary and reasonable expenses.
Oh.
What is?
I have no idea.
I believe that's what it says. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. What is reasonable?
I'm sure you're right, and I'm sure that Linda's committee will define what reasonable expenses might be from an ethical point of view. Then this is another topic for council.
Okay. Shane.
Good afternoon, my name is Shane. Hey, how'd you know my name?
Sometimes I remember things.
All right. Thanks very much. My question is for Mayor Rawson also, and for Mr. Crossland as well. I agree with you on the salary being too high, and I'm hoping that you can fill us in just a little bit on the role of the council in amending the charter. And can you just explain the amendment process as well? And I know that's listed in there because in terms of saving taxpayer dollars, which you mentioned, Mr. Zanotti had actually stated in an article about the familiar faces and names that we've seen running for the office that reform is best served if voters have a wide variety of choices different from the ones they've had in the past, and I'm concerned that's not happening. And I think one of the reasons that's not happening is not because we're paying council members too little, but because we're paying them too much. So I'm wondering, and how would it work also, being that the terms would be staggered, and whether or not the salary would be open for amendment in the charter? And to Mr. Crossland, I know that you had mentioned that if there is an insurance salesman or a grocer who is seeking that office, that they may need some assistance through the staff to help them better formulate some questions. I'm actually hoping that we do have an insurance salesman or grocer on our council so we can add not just diversity of gender and race, but some diversity of perspective as well.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions, one for each panelist.
As to the process for the Charter Review Commission, it's covered in section 12.09, and in the first one, usually charter reviews are not all that interesting to the public, but in 2012, it's going to be very interesting. And so in September of 2012, the county executive with the confirmation of council will appoint a Charter Review Commission of 9 people, no more than 5 of whom shall be from the same political party, and no more than 2 of whom may be an officer or employee of the county. They'll work for a year. I guess this isn't going to go on the ballot until 2013. And I think everything is open for amendment. So I'm assuming they will then have hearings and we'll go through the kind of discussion we went through when we passed this charter, and then and the county executive must provide the commission necessary staff services. So then you'll get to go, you'll get to make suggestions about reducing salary, or there's also a provision in this charter that if the county loses population, that the charter size will be adjusted downward to be proportional to our population. So I think we're going to have a great debate in 2012 over this.
Pete, you want to?
Question.
I know. Was there a second question?
Yeah.
I've lost. What was the second question?
That was actually more of just a statement.
It was a comment about your comment on...
About the grocers?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to be derisive of grocers or insurance people. I mean, I do think you're absolutely right that ideally council's a diverse group.
What are the backgrounds?
But I don't know what beyond that.
The backgrounds of some of the members of the Summit County Council?
The background of our members?
Professional backgrounds, just generally.
Just some of them.
Yeah, well, you know, we do have an insurance salesman, an insurance agency guy. We do have a variety. We've had a lot of attorneys. Right now, there are 11 of us and no attorneys, and I miss them, really. Mostly.
Some days, right?
And so I'm trying to think, we have some school teachers, we have, we have the social services director, we have a variety of people, and it really doesn't matter where you come from, but it helps if you come from some place where you've had, like the insurance fella, is pretty helpful when insurance issues comes up. He knows a little more about insurance than somebody else. And so, there's a place for everybody, but to the extent that people who get on council can bring some frame of reference where they've had in-depth experience in government or something very like government, that's where they can make a greater contribution than someone who maybe just decides to run for it and has a good name or raise a lot of money or something and doesn't really know where to begin. Now, that was my point. Thanks.
Okay. All right. There was, I don't know where the mic is. Oh, okay, so that's, and then we'll get to you. Okay.
My name is Nancy Dietrich. I'm a recently retired city council person from a city that actually does have a city manager form of government, which is sort of similar to what you're talking about. I'm having trouble envisioning the conversation about staff. I'm having trouble picturing what it would be like if this council had its own staff when there already is a whole county staff. I would have imagined that our county commissioners would have been able to avail themselves of the budget director, the law director, etc., of the county, and I think I would have envisioned that this council would do the same. And so when you're talking about having more than maybe just someone who helped them answer the phone or something, I can't picture how that would gel in making there be any unity between the staff that exists and the council.
I agree.
I'm not sure, the unity between the staff and the executive staff and the council. Yeah. Well, you know, let's not get carried away, but look at Washington. Now, a lot of things we don't want to look at Washington, but you know, the Congress has enormous resources. Look at Columbus. You know, the Congress, the Assembly has the LBO, the Legislative Budget Office. They have the LSC, Legislative Service Commission. They have tremendous resources available to do analysis and research and give opinions of legal and budgetary things. And if you just rely on the executive, that's okay as long as everything's fine in the executive. But if you believe in some co-equal branch and some kind of balance of power, which sometimes you don't really need, but sometimes you really do, you know, then that's the problem anyway.
And I think this is for the next council, and I think it's going to be a huge debate. But I think the way in which the two branches are equal is that the executive can't do much without the council's approval. He needs the council's approval to pass the budget, to pass the laws, so that he or she can put programs in place and run them. And so I think you've got a clear balance of power. You don't necessarily need similarly sized staffs to have the balance of power.
And I didn't mean to suggest you think we're going to have 1,000.
Oh, not at all similarly sized, but you do need to have your own lawyer, especially if there's a big debate about some legal question, and especially if you don't quite agree with the executive's point of view on something, you know. So.
Okay, it's a question here, and then we'll get to Dale Miller.
Thank you. Don Saka, candidate for District 6 County Council. I was 24 years councilman at large in the city of Broadview Heights. Before I ask my question, I'd just like to make the comment that some of those old familiar faces that we've heard so much about during the last week are sometimes mounted on some very, very dedicated bodies. I have attended several of these advisory groups. There are 11 of them, I believe. They've had something like in excess of 120 meetings. The meetings that I have attended have been absolutely excellent. The only thing that concerns me is there doesn't seem to be any smooth transition from recommendation to implementation. And I would ask you, and put this in form of a question, might it not be a wise thing to do, while these groups are still fresh from their tasks, after the June 24th filing deadline, when we have at least the group of people who are going to be on the ballot in one form or another. Some of them may not be, of course, because we have the September 7th primary, but at least we know who the prospective candidates are, to hold an all-day seminar for those folks, presented briefly by those advisory groups, so that they would begin on task.
Joanne is the one to answer.
Yeah, this may be not a panelist, but
we are already planning.
Can't hear you.
You got to yell.
That's a very good question. We are on, just had a couple meetings. We are planning.
You may want to identify who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. Joe Nani, county employee, member of the Transition Advisory Group. That is exactly something that we're planning right now. We're getting the agenda together, and we're getting the location and trying to figure out an agenda that includes all of the things that you have mentioned.
Okay.
Could I just comment briefly too and say the concerns being raised here are good ones, and you know, it's the same kind of problem you have when you elect a new president or governor or a new county executive. A lot of work has to be done in November and December, and then you know who the people are, and then you really bore down. Hopefully, if you can, I think it's a great idea that these various committees be very active and then present things to the newly elected office holders. So they should be prepared to go to work with no pay in November and December and
November
really work
5.
hard. Yeah, right, the day after the election.
Okay. We'll hear from Dale Miller, and then I have about 6 questions that have been circulating. Oh, okay, Dale Miller, this young lady, and then I'll cover these 6 questions so that we make sure everyone's voice has been heard.
I'm Dale Miller, candidate for County Council in District 2. My question is to Mayor Rawson, and it is whether the council may propose amendments to the charter prior to the meeting of the Charter Commission. For example, every time we hold the primaries in September, it's an extra something like $4 million, and in my opinion, it would be very good for us to move the primaries back to May for the 2012 elections, which would save that money, but we could not do that unless we can go ahead and submit that amendment prior to the amendment commission process.
Well, Senator, my impression is that the September primary is only for this year. And after that, it will be in accordance with the regular primary. And Gene Kramer is sitting in the back, and he says I am correct. As to the question of whether the council could initiate a charter amendment, I suppose, I don't know. I mean, you could start a charter review committee in any year, I think. You just must do it at least starting in 2012 and every 10 years thereafter.
Okay. And the young lady here, and then we'll hear from some of the submitted questions.
I'm Lois Rogoff, and I'm one of the members of the Campaign Finance Reform Committee. And one of the things that we are debating right now is whether or not campaign finance should be public campaign finance reform. And I'm curious to know what each of your opinion is of that.
Saying publicly funded?
Publicly funded, that's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. Pete?
Whether or not county elections should be publicly funded, is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't think the charter addresses that at all. And of course, you know, with a recent Supreme Court decision, everything is a little bit up for grabs. And I think it's whether you believe in that system or not, you know. I mean, and I don't think it's been a major issue here that I know of. But I personally think it's a great idea, but it's not one that's universally accepted. And I know. I'm trying to think. I think Maine has some of that at the local, at the state representative level.
States have it. Maine, Connecticut, and Arizona.
Yeah.
And there are many cities that have it.
Yeah. I don't know of any cities in Ohio that have it. I don't think there are, but I might have missed it.
I think you're already better informed than I am at this point.
Me too.
I do think it's hard to put that kind of a requirement in the first charter because there are very strong disagreements about it. But I think that council will want to set some standards for campaign finance disclosure, fairness, whether they say they want it all public would be a hard thing to achieve in the first year, but your committee will recommend a great solution.
Okay.
Your work group, sorry.
Question from the floor. Is the new county executive bound by the recommendations by the various committees of the county transition?
Absolutely not.
No way.
And so to expand on what Joe Notting just said, I guess they're talking about a informational session in the summer sometime. There you are. Each work group is required to have a draft report, hopefully short, by the end of August, so that as soon as the primary has occurred in September and people actually know they're on the ballot, they can start to dig into these recommendations. We hope they will become a subject for the debate all fall during the election, and then starting November 5, I think that those who are elected are going to start looking at this and say, does this make sense or not? And in January, they will adapt as much of it as they think makes sense. So this is the opportunity for the public to have a huge impact on whether the recommendations are adopted or not by making it a campaign issue.
Okay. And Judy, this is for you. Has a master list been formed of all possible departments needed to be handled by the new county government?
I think so. I think that the Transition Advisory Group is putting together a list of all the departments, boards, and commissions that need to be coordinated under the new county government.
Okay.
And there is a work group working on boards and commissions.
Okay. And Pete, I'll start with you on this, and then Judy, you may comment as well. But how does the citizen's voice get factored into the policy debate and in decision making?
Well, I don't think there's any formula for county council or county government any different than anything else. I mean, we all know about what we do to have the citizens' voice. They contact their representatives where possible by meetings or letters or phone calls. They write letters to the editor. They go about the business of looking at candidates and seeing who they vote for and that kind of thing. I don't think there's any, I can't think of any off the top of my head particular ways to encourage county government. Now, one of the things that when I first went into politics, and I see a lot of people doing, say, well, I'm going to really be active. In my district, I'm going to have district meetings all the time, and I'm going to get out there and listen to the people. And that's a commendable spirit, but most of the time, not too many people show up at those meetings, And so, to encourage them is a good thing, but it's not easy to get input unless people are really involved and have some motivation. And then we hear from them. Every once in a while, some issue will come up in county council, and the phone rings off the hook down there. Our staff doesn't get anything done, and we get lots of letters. But most of the time, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
But there's always the possibility it can, which is why it's a great country.
Good. Judy?
I actually think this is going to be one of the great challenges of this new county, and the council will want to think hard about ways to build systematic public input into their procedures. The one idea that I'm very fond of, so I'll mention it again, is there are going to be 11 council members, so I'm guessing there are going to be 11 council committees, so that every council member can chair a committee. If you had, say, 10 people on a committee and 4 of them were members of the public with an expertise relevant to the jurisdiction of that committee, you would automatically get regular public input. And then I would urge that those citizen memberships be rotated so that more people get a shot and they don't become political thank you. They're really more a structural way to get some public expertise. But I think, the council may want to take committees on the road or council meetings on the road. This is a big county geographically, and to move it around, make it a little easier for people to come to meetings. But they'll get creative about this.
Well, we have done that had some meetings on the road, and if there's some hot issues, that works. Other times we get a lot of trouble on our staff, we all haul up to some distant part of the county and nobody shows up. Right. So it's hard, but just in reference to the number of committees, probably wouldn't be 11 because not everybody would be a committee chair. Okay. President, for example, might not be, and it might be, you need to look at how many committees you need in terms of clustering expertise. Right. I think we have 7, I have to count them, but but what you say is, and the committee structure is of course a very good one, and I don't know how you'll set this up. I know Akron City has committees every afternoon, council in the evening. Our council, for example, has Monday night committee meetings, and then the next week Monday night council meetings, and we encourage the public more to come to committees. So that's certainly a structure where you get some input.
Okay. Here's a question. What was the rationale for partisan elections? Takes you off the hook, Pete.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Well,
okay.
That would be another one for Shaker Heights, they are nonpartisan, and partisan politics has never mattered in terms of setting policy, but I think the thought was that for the first charter, maybe we didn't want to move too far.
Okay. And a question, and I believe this is for council meetings, and it's titled Televised Meetings. Has there been discussion of televising meetings?
Well, the question would be who would televise them? And, you know, it would have to be, I think some cable companies have been interested in that from time to time, but someone else has information on that, it looks like, out here.
One thing I can tell you is that when we've been looking at the space for the new council chambers, we're looking at technology that will allow, not necessarily televising, obviously that's able, but we can stream it live through the webcast with our great IT folks that are filming today.
Okay. And as an extension of that, perhaps board meetings, make audio tape and or transcripts available to the public and permit public to ask questions during meetings. So I'm not sure if that's a question or a suggestion.
Hi. I'm
Okay.
Jean Schmatzer. I'm the current clerk of the board for the county commissioners, and at this point there are digital recordings of all the commission meetings, and you know, if you want them sent via email or whatever, or on a CD, we can provide that.
Okay, and taking that one step further, be able to justify decision rationale for decisions which are controversial. And the suggestion is post on a website the written justification, cost-benefit analysis, provide input, documents, and other sources of information, etc. So I think that's in the spirit of full disclosure of what's going on.
Currently, the Board of County Commissioners has what's called an agenda memo, and the information that they're provided, at least initial information from the departments as submitted by the department directors, and supporting documentation is available on the website every Wednesday prior to their Thursday meetings. And so you can just download that if you don't want the whole packet of information. A couple weeks ago it was actually a whole ream of paper. That's how large that meeting was. We do have what we call a public agenda, where it doesn't have like a history and the briefing memos and backup documentation, and that is available every week on the website.
Okay, I think Rhea has a question.
I do have
Need a microphone.
question on a card that I'd like to ask you directly with
Okay, we probably need to give you a mic so we can, you're so soft-spoken. Okay.
Hello, I'm Burl Rothschild, former mayor of University Heights. My question is, where is the funding for Summit County government come from? And do you have the ability to put the idea of raising taxes on the the ballot? Where is all this money coming from? And when you add up $45,000 per person that's going to get their salary, the benefits, I guess, are iffy or something, and that's quite a sum in Cuyahoga County. Where the devil is all this money going to come from? Well, you can't answer that. You can only answer for Summit. I'll leave that to Rawson to answer on the money.
Well, I think the answer is the money from Summit is coming from traditional sources, and the money in Cuyahoga County will come from those same sources. And you know, sales tax is important, property tax, different transfer taxes, number of fees, etc.
So those have to be transferred with some type of legal document. It just can't absorb it just like that. But what do you say, Judy, to the money issue?
I think that as to the salaries of the council members, that will get built into the budget, which I think staff starts working on in the fall of this year. So the budget will be proposed in December. Is that when you do it?
But yes. That's more than salaries. There's other things too.
Yes. So the current staff, and this transition is being led by 3 staff members, 2 of whom are here, and the 3rd has a representative.
I think it's very important for the public to know before they vote what that budget is going to be. And if it implies any raising of taxes.
Before they vote for the candidate?
At the last vote for the councilman. I think all the councilmen should know exactly what we're headed into regarding funding of this entire county government. We already know that a lot of the money in the county was wasted, and we don't want a repeat of that.
Well, I think from what I've heard from the staff, they are very aware of the desire to save money in the county budget overall, and I am assuming that's going to be a pretty high priority. The specific point of how much the council is going to cost is a fair point, and they will fold that into the budget, and then we will discuss it, debate it again at the time of the charter reform. Thank you.
Okay, then green shirt.
I didn't think you were going to get to me right away. Since we're speaking on budget here, by the way, my name is Don Saunders. I'm on City Council in the City of Bedford right now, and I am a candidate for District 9's County Council. Speaking of budget, you mentioned that they're going to put the budget together in December, but who is actually, one, going to pass the budget, because the County Council and the Executive don't take over until the first of the year. It's got to be passed before the first of the year because the county can't shut down on January 1, so it has to continue. Is it going to be an interim budget? And then how are you going to do a budget when you don't even know the structure of the departments yet, because you're doing away with all the elected officials, so those departments have to be approved by the executive and the council after January 1, so this is going to be a mix-up mismatch because the county council and executive can't pass it in December because they're not officially in the office yet.
Well, Joe is rushing to answer that question for you.
So, okay, because somewhere along the line there's got to be some logical steps put in, whether it's an interim budget that, and whatever afterwards that the council and the executive look at.
And here's Joe.
Some of the answers to your question we're still trying to get through, so that's part of what's happening currently in the county. It was mentioned that December was going to be the date that the commissioners passed the budget. The discussion has recently been that we're going to try to do it much earlier this go around, because we're going to need to obviously provide appropriate funding for the new council. The current commissioners have that in mind. They want to make sure that they're leaving the appropriate funding in place, but you know, the reality is on January 1st, the new council could amend the budget any way they like. Those are going to be the newly elected officials. So as we go through the rest of through the summer, hopefully we'll have some more details for the public and the candidates to see what that budget will look like. But we want to put in there all of the things necessary to make sure that the new council, the new executive and the council can function properly.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question right here.
I'm Steve Bennett, former University Heights councilman. You mentioned in Summit County that you've recently taken on economic development. And in this county, there are 4 areas, and the 5th one will be economic development. We currently have health and human services, criminal justice, public works will be in the new, take care of mostly engineering, budget finance, economic development. You also said that when a company came in, when they come into your area, and this is where my question lies, are you the council or is the county government the one-stop shop government when I want to start a business, and that's big in this area, in this part of Ohio. We need new business, entrepreneurship business. Do you satisfy that, or how do you handle that? When I come in, I want to put something somewhere in Summit County. I don't say Akron, I don't say Green Township, I don't say Cuyahoga Falls, I just say in Summit County.
Well, you'd obviously have to say one of those places. I mean, if it's going to be in Akron, then you're going to have to deal with Akron. It's going to be in Cuyahoga Falls, that. And so, I want to correct, I don't think that we've done anything radically a new structure in Summit County. Lately, we've just been more active about putting some things together cooperatively with the city and so forth. Beyond that, I'm not sure where to go with it. The one-stop shop is always a nice idea, and I know at different times county executives have made efforts to to do that, but obviously you would have to coordinate that with the other government entities involved, like a city.
We have about 5 minutes remaining on what we said was the original time. You try.
Can I answer very briefly while the microphone? That is a great question. And I think we do need one-stop shopping. And the charter creates an economic development commission with members appointed by all the major economic development players to develop a plan. The Economic Development Transition Work Group is going to try to talk about mechanisms to coordinate our efforts, because we've got a lot of nonprofits trying to help in this, and we're tripping all over each other.
Okay.
Hi, I'm a grocer that sells insurance on the side.
All right.
No, I'm joking. My name is Alan Sorfman. I'm from Broadview Heights. Just a quick question, probably relating to what we talked about with the transition coming up. One big event for the county in December is the mailing of property taxes with payment due in January. I assume that's been looked at, and it's just going to continue, because we definitely wouldn't want to see that break down somehow, and you know, the funds not come in January.
You know, I'm fairly detached from this. I've just started working with these folks from the county, and I want to tell this room that from my experience, they are all about smooth transition and predictability. So we will make some mistakes during the transition, but failing to worry about things that need to be done for a smooth transition, I don't think is one of them.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
And the gentleman next to you, and then our host has a question.
My name is Jim Cool. I'm a resident of Cleveland Heights, and I'm working on the procurement committee, and also plan to be at the economic development meeting. One of the things that has come to my attention is the idea of possibly saving money that could then be applied toward economic development. I heard you say, Pete, about the lack of funds for economic development, and it's not been a high priority in the beginning. Did Summit County save money when they went to your form of government?
I don't have any numbers, but I'm sure that we did.
In what area?
I don't think anybody ever, to my knowledge, came out with a definitive answer. But if I just look at the budgetary process, when we had county commissioners, there was a three-way wrangle all the time, and then with each individual office holders, and certain commissioners were more responsive to certain office holders, and were able to get more staff, and you know, there was a lot of political webs going on. And I could see this even when I came on council after we had it. I joined council in the 9th year of our charter, and I could even see then that some of the older members, or original members of the council, who had special ties with certain office holders, those guys would be working deals and so forth, and there just wasn't the budgetary control, and there was some real arm wrestling. And I suspect that you're, because you don't have, but if you just imagine you had all the independent sources of power saying, I've been elected clerk of courts, I've been elected coroner, so I insist that I have this money and I'm going to hire these people, and so to try to budget like that is just very difficult. So to have a centralized budget authority, right away you're going to save money. And you're also going to recognize, I think it's a legitimate thing for any elected official to want to have a certain amount of staff that is loyal to them and works with them to make sure they do a good job and so forth. That's a political element. By having fewer offices, you won't need as many people in those kind of jobs. Those would be two obvious things that I think will save money and in the long run a good deal of money.
Well, I'll make a statement then. I hope that that's what we do, and I hope that money is significant enough to be combined with the money from the private sector to do some of the things that we need to do in our county. Otherwise, we're probably going to go around in circles.
Okay.
We're not going to be satisfied with the end result.
All right, thank you. And Judy. Question. Oh, Judy,
let me just say that in January, the Transition Advisory Group brought all the co-chairs of work groups together. I think you said you're on the procurement, so the co-chairs were there, and they gave us a charge, which was to find, was it 15% savings, Gary? They didn't say by when, but that was our goal, and every work group is supposed to be trying to figure that out. And there are private sector co-chairs of each of these work groups, and they are focused like a laser on that point.
And just to have a central elected official who has that responsibility, and you know, I'm very much a pro-government person, but in Summit County, our revenues went down from about 112 million down to 80 or 97 or something like that, and all of a sudden we just had to really cut back, and we've had some problems because we have cut back a little bit where it hurt, but I'm amazed how much we were able to save. And I think if you've got a central authority really bearing down and saying, okay, we got to tighten the belt here, we got to be more efficient, 15% is easy.
Okay. And what could be our final question of the evening?
Hi, my name is Kathy Alapi, and I'm pretty much a lifelong resident of Cuyahoga County. And as we all know in this room, the image of Cuyahoga County is, there's a saying that it was about as high as a snake belly in a wheel rut. And I am afraid that the work that all of us volunteers are doing to put into these committees is just being done as a feel-good measure on part of the county. I've been sitting in a subcommittee, and Cuyahoga County has some wonderful services, but from what I'm seeing personally is I feel that it has a very expensive delivery service. And I think as the committees go on, we're going to find some real methods with real teeth in it to help save quite a bit of money. Are these going to be taken seriously? I mean, we're going to get into some serious issues like outsourcing, accountability, documenting, whatever. And I just hope all of this work that we're putting into is not going to be thrown away or put in a box somewhere. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, Kathy, because this has turned into a full-time job for way too many of us. And that's why we have to make it a campaign issue in the fall, so that we develop a groundswell for some of these best practices that are being used everywhere else in the country, and we can do it here too.
Okay. Our original task this evening was to come together and have some thoughtful conversation with regard to our new county government. I'd like to think that we accomplished that. I'd like to think that our panelists and I certainly appreciate the input, participation, active participation by the almost 50 of us who convened this evening. So as you travel home and listen to what should be about the fourth inning of the Indians game, be safe. And thank you. Good job.